All right, good morning. Welcome to our School Safety Summit. We are certainly very glad to have you with us here today. I'm Andrea Dearden, the department's Chief Communications Officer, and going to be kind of navigating you through the next 2 hours as we share lots of information about how to keep our schools, our teachers, our staff, our students safe, and of course, how to connect with our community so that we can be partners with everyone that lives in our community in order to keep us safe. This is about one powerful goal, and that is safety. And this is something that is incredibly important to our Superintendent of Public Instruction, Debbie Critchfield. And that is really the reason that we brought this together. And so she's here to tell us a little bit about why we're doing this today. Debbie, how did this come about?
Thank you, Andrea. It really has grown out of conversations that I've had around the state. No matter where I've traveled in Idaho, when folks approach me and want to talk to me about education, school safety comes up in the conversation, whether it's a trip to Costco or I'm somewhere in the community for Capital for a day. And it's not just parents, it's across the board. People care deeply about knowing that our kids and school staff are safe during the day. And school safety isn't just a national issue that we talk about in other places when there's a tragedy. It really needs to be a day-to-day local issue, and it takes in so many partners and approaches. And as we think of safety as a community issue, how we're working together to prevent harm, how we respond well when challenges arise. It helps us create this environment where our students are supported and secure and they feel seen. And I think when we talk about safety in our schools, we're not just talking about doors, cameras, and drills. We're talking about people. And every student, every teacher, every parent deserves the confidence that school is a safe place to learn and to belong. And that's why today matters to me. Across Idaho, we see incredible efforts happening in local districts and charters, from proactive mental health supports to facility upgrades and partnerships with law enforcement. And I really want this summit to bring us together to share ideas, identify gaps, strengthen the network that protects our kids. So thank you for committing your time. That's so important. And to our panelists for their expertise in this work. And I look forward to the conversations ahead.
Right. We are actually going to spend the next 2 hours. We're going to hear from experts. We're going to hear from educators, first responders. We have someone from the 911 dispatch community who are going to remind us exactly what you just said. And that is that this isn't just policy. It's really about a mindset. It's about something that we do, the action that we take each and every day. And it oftentimes does involve those partnerships and those relationships. And to that point, this is a live event. And so we want you to interact with us, engage with us, let us know what you want to know, right? So ask us those questions. We have that chat function right there on the YouTube Live. And so you can put your questions in there, put your comments in there, share comments with each other. And then as we go throughout the day, after each of the presentations, we'll have an opportunity for some questions and answers. And so we'll take a few minutes and try to get to as many of those questions as you can get into that chat. And as much time as we have, we'll try to put those together and get those questions answered for you. And also following the summit, we will send you an email with some resources. So all of our presenters today have put together some really great tips and tools, kind of toolkits that we will be able to share with you at the end of that summit. So if I don't have your email, if you have not registered yet, then go ahead and make sure that we have that email and that registration link, and then we'll be able to get those resources to you at the end of our summit. And again, we appreciate anybody who jumps into that chat feature. Be brave about it, share your questions and your comments. So we're going to begin first talking about the importance of awareness in our daily routines. Every day you walk through the hallways, you greet students, you kind of move through familiar spaces, and true safety, we know, starts with noticing those little things, oftentimes things that maybe somebody else wouldn't recognize. And having that awareness and knowing what to do with it can make a huge difference when it comes to safety. And no one better to talk about that awareness than our Blaine County Sheriff, Morgan Ballas. Sheriff Ballas is a nationally recognized school safety subject matter expert. He's the past president of the Idaho Association of School Resource Officers and represents the Idaho Sheriff's Association on the Idaho School Safety Advisory Board. Sheriff Ballas holds a master's degree in Homeland Security and Emergency Management, is also a doctoral candidate working toward a PhD in Emergency Management, focused on evidence-based K-12 school safety practices. Sheriff Ballas, thank you so much for being here, sharing your expertise and your passion for school safety with us so that we can all be just a little bit more aware and just a little bit smarter as we end today. Sheriff Ballas.
Andrea, thank you so much. I just want to thank you and Superintendent Critchfield for this opportunity for us to learn together and connect. I'm very excited about this. I'm going to thank all of our audience for joining us. And please be sure to jump into that chat and ask any questions that you have. I'm going to share this guy here. Andrea, are we able to see that? Okay. Andrea, can you confirm that we can see the slide?
Yes, we can. We are able to see that screen, so we appreciate that. Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right. So what I really want to talk about, what I am passionate about when it comes to system changes and being in a leadership position, no matter what level that leadership position is I always ask myself, what is in my control? What can I do now? And really, what is some low-hanging fruit that I'm able to go after to get some quick wins, to get buy-ins in order to make those long-term system changes and have those positive impacts. So what are barriers that we're all going to face in the school system? Well, we have funding. We have a lack of policies at the district or site level. Sometimes we're not setting clear goals and clear timelines and holding ourselves accountable to those goals and timelines. There's also challenges when it comes to expertise and best practices. There might be some mixed information out there. We might be seeking knowledge and expertise from individuals that, yes, law enforcement, for example, they're looked to as the de facto experts in active shooter response. But here's a little secret. Law enforcement are not experts at educating educators or educating students. And sometimes the way that we train our officers, we try to train our educators and our students the same way. And sometimes we do more harm than good. So there's challenges there. We have challenges in gaining buy-in from our staff, from our parents, from our community. And all this at the end of the day leads to challenges and barriers in terms of execution. And so what I want to talk about today is at the district and site level, what are some ways we can get to work right now? What are some ideas for you as leaders in your schools to start to go after, to get those quick wins, to look at some of that low-hanging fruit? And what I have found in the schools that I've been able to support is that when we get some of those quick wins, we start to gain that buy-in, and that creates the momentum we need to start to go after those short-term and long-term goals. So my academic background, the theoretical basis is in risk communication. And what I have found most fascinating about risk communication is these formulas I'm going to give you don't have to just do with communicating risk. They have to do with communicating any message that you want to bring forward. Whether you're trying to go after a school levy, whether you're trying to introduce some new curriculum to your staff, or in this case, when we're trying to make some changes in terms of our security posture and our safety mindset, these are things as leaders that you're going to have to address and that you're going to have to recognize. And so what we're looking at here is the outline for protection motivation theory. And there's 3 parts to this. The first part is conducting a risk assessment. And a risk assessment includes looking at the probability or the likelihood that an event is going to happen. And then what are the consequences associated with that event? So that then gives us an idea of a calculated risk. This is what's known as fear appeal. So essentially this comes out of medical theory, and it says, hey, if I tell you that, if I can show you that smoking is bad and the more you smoke, the higher the health consequences, then you're likely to change your behavior. Thinking about this another way, this is where we get our data. So when you're trying to figure out what safety protocols you're looking to shift or mindsets that you want to change, we have to start by collecting data. We all know, and again, smoking as an example, just because you know something's bad, it doesn't mean you're going to change your behavior. So protection motivation theory also talks about efficacy. And what this really is do I believe that the solution you're presenting is the right solution to answer this problem? When we're looking at school safety, this is now where we're examining best practice recommendations. We're looking at emergency and emergent research and empirical evidence to help guide us in what is the best answer for this solution. And then the last part of protection motivation theory is self-efficacy. And it's, do I believe that I can actually execute this solution? I recognize that there is a risk and a consequence associated with that risk. I accept that your answer is the best answer, but am I capable of achieving this answer? This is where we get into our plan for training, professional development, and really developing self-confidence in our staff and students to actually achieve those outcomes that the best practice recommendations and emergent research are providing for us. Given all that, we have protection motivation theory, but we also have the social application of risk framework, or SARF. And what this says is that You can have all those things. You can identify you can do your risk assessment, you can have efficacy, you can have self-efficacy, but that at the end of the day, people are influenced by social factors. And these include political influences, religious beliefs, the media that we consume, and also lived in experiences. And then on top of that, we also look to who is this messenger? The person that's providing the message, are they credible? Do they have some sort of authority or expertise in this area? So as you're moving forward in trying to achieve your safety goals, I want you to really understand these two concepts of protection motivation theory and this SARF framework, because you're going to have to address these issues. At the end of the day, if we can format what we're trying to achieve to these two different theories, this is where the buy-in comes in. And it's the most important thing. And you all know this as educators, as you try to implement new curriculum or new protocols at your site, you're always going to get pushback. So what we need to do as leaders is figure out, how do we frame this conversation? How do we collect the data, identify best practices, consider social influences, and then identify who is the best messenger to bring this forward in order to get that buy-in. Because once we get that buy-in, that's where we really start to get momentum. You can invest all the money you want in a behavioral health threat assessment model, but if your staff that have to execute that model, they don't believe in it, or they're facing their own barriers, then we're going to fall off track. And so I really want you, as we move forward in this conversation, to think about these different aspects. So getting to work at the district level, I'm just going to kind of go through some of these things really quickly. So I want to leave time for us to have a good conversation and to be able to answer as many questions as possible. What are some quick wins that you can go after? If you don't already have a district safety team, you need to create a district safety team. These are representatives from each of your schools. They often include administrators, counselors, school psychologists, school resource officers. If you don't have school resource officers, then reaching out to your local law enforcement agencies and your fire and EMS responders. This is the team that is going to set the vision and the direction for your short-term and your long-term goals. They provide different areas of expertise and consideration in your conversations. The staff safety surveys, I'm actually going to go over this a little bit later. We have to start with data, and we have to start with data that is from our actual local areas and from our sites. I've worked with multiple districts across the U.S., and this is always where we start. We start by sending out information to our staff so that can help direct us and help us identify what we need to go after short-term and long-term. If you're not already doing it, when at the beginning of each school year doing an annual all safety PD for your staff, this is a kind of surface level review of your emergency response procedures, giving them expectations of what drills are coming up in the next year and an opportunity to address the entire staff if there's any changes to your safety protocols and procedures. And then with that, understanding there's a difference from staff that have been here for a while and new staff coming on board, having a more in-depth new staff PD at the beginning of the year to get more into the details of what those procedures and protocols look like. And then from there, once you identify a change that you want to make and you've developed that standard, and I'm talking directly to our superintendents that are in with us today, you have to create a written policy. This is what's going to hold you and your administrators accountable to whatever goal you've set. I've seen this time and time again where we come together as a safety team, we come up with a plan and a vision, we all agree on how it's going to be executed, but at the end of the day, life gets in the way, right? We're here to teach, we're here to educate our students, and a lot of times our safety protocols get put on the back burner. When we have a written policy, it holds us accountable. It gives you as superintendents leverage with your administrators and really telling them that this isn't an option, this is something that you are required to do. At the site level, some different ideas here for you. I want you to walk away today not just feeling motivated, I also don't want you to walk away feeling defeated if you haven't had the opportunity to really examine this. And these are some areas that you can look at as administrators to actually get to work right now. We talked about district level safety teams. You should have site level safety teams. Again, this should include administrators, counselors, school psychologists, school social workers, law enforcement, EMS coming together to set the vision and the goals for your site. Those staff safety surveys, if your district isn't going to put those out, you can put those out on a site level. Again, I'll talk about those in a minute. Creating as many touch points as you can with staff and students. We create emergency procedures and protocols, and maybe we do one training. Maybe you're just handing your teachers an emergency binder and saying, read this. It is not enough. And I'll tell you now, if your staff are challenged with the language or the expectations for your protocols, I guarantee you your students are even further behind because they have even less touch points. Creating touch points is really simple. You're required by state statute to do an evacuation or a fire drill every single month. All you need to do is add a 5-minute review of all your emergency protocols before you do every evacuation drill. It's low impact, and it's there to refresh both your staff and students on your language and the expectations. Staff and visitor ID, what we did at one of our sites, we were getting some pushback from the other sites on what this vision looked like across the district. And so one of the high schools I worked with, we said, you know what, we're just going to create our own system. And so we got 3 different colored lanyards. One of those were for our permanent staff on site. One of those were for district staff visiting our site. And the third one were visitor lanyards. And this really helped us overcome the challenge of making sure that everyone was accounted for, identifying people that were on site. And it helped our staff recognize when there were adults on campus that they didn't know, to be able to approach them. And if they didn't have a lanyard, direct them to where they needed to be there at our school. Emergency binders. I'm going to give you some materials today on what to do to build emergency binders. The biggest thing I want to say here is that our emergency binders do not replace our training. They do not replace our professional development, and they're not a quick, here, read this so you understand our procedures. Our emergency binders overwhelmingly are what we use for an evacuation, so that way we can get accountability, we know where we need to go, and they're really important for our substitute teachers as well. Emergency buckets. Hey, if you're at your site, review your emergency buckets, get with your local law enforcement and EMS, create a standardized bucket that works for you and your site with any special considerations. Just understand the main purpose of the emergency buckets are for when you are in, for some of us, an extended lockdown and you're stuck in that room. That is the main purpose of those emergency buckets. Parent communication. What are you doing right now prior to a drill to communicate with parents and guardians about the expectations for that drill? What you're doing with your students. This is an easy and very important way for you to communicate your emergency procedures with parents and guardians and get them involved in those discussions, lower some of the fears that we know happen when there's an event at one of our schools, and also set expectations for what to do if there is an event. We know parents are going to show up. We know they're going to call your front office, but we can actually mitigate that by communicating early when we're conducting drills. Creating objective-based drills, I'll talk about that here in a little bit. A locked door policy, I cannot emphasize this enough. Creating a locked door policy inside of your building. These are for our interior doors. You can keep your doors locked, put magnets on the doors, use lock blocks. There's a lot of different devices that are out there that are very low cost that will positively impact every single one of your emergency procedures. Room numbers on external windows. What this does is when first responders are responding to your site, they now, if you're calling out a specific room or a specific location, they can identify that as they're approaching your building. Again, something that's very low cost that you can partner with your first responders on to achieve. And then trauma-informed practices. I'll just give you a couple quick, easy wins that you absolutely should be doing. National Association of School Psychologists and School Resource Officers have documents that are out here that support this. there is no reason to be doing unannounced drills. Your staff and students should know the date and time of every drill that's going to happen. Looking at things like if you're doing an active shooter drill, there's no need to pound on the door and shake the door handle before entering the room. It's unnecessary. So just thinking about those little things where we can reduce fear and anxiety. Remember, the goal of our drills is to train in order to increase our response time during a real event. Another easy thing you can do is differentiate the announcement that you use for an emergency versus a drill. This will absolutely increase response time, reduce fear and anxiety, and increase trust and confidence in your systems. So staff service, easy place for you to start as a district or a site. What you're going to do is you're going to create questions, and you're kind of looking at questions in 3 different areas that'll answer these questions. The first, this gives you an opportunity to kind of test your staff's knowledge of your current language and systems. This is really important, and overwhelmingly what I have found through these surveys is that there's a lot of confusion in that language. This helps you identify that clearly versus just assuming that it's there. The second is you're going to get information on perceptions of safeties. There's going to be differences between each site, but your teachers are going to tell you what they think is important and what they think in terms of risk, what they think is important. And the last thing is you're going to be able to identify some of these themes at the district and site level to let you know what you should go after and help you create that plan in order to start achieving some of those goals. What you will do with that information is you're going to identify gaps. And this is the beautiful part of doing these surveys is you start to understand where those gaps are. Is it a lack of policy or a lack of clear policy? Is it a training issue? Is it more of a self-confidence, that self-efficacy on our staff's part? Is it a lack of resources? Are there competing needs, meaning that your staff feels that the type of drills and the length of your drills is taking away from their instructional time, and how do we address that issue? Or is there just a lack of empowerment? We see this a lot with who has the authority to initiate emergency response protocols. Overwhelmingly in the schools I've worked with, that tends to fall to the administrators, but in an emergency, everyone should have the authority to make that announcement or initiate those protocols. So maybe there's a lack of empowerment. And then once you get that data from your site, you're going to compare that result to the state vulnerability assessments. The state's already giving you a whole bunch of data, especially on the physical security of your sites. You're going to look at best practice recommendations, emergent research, and that empirical data. So now this is where we start to get into that protection motivation theory and kind of hitting all those different areas. And then you start to get to work. You look for those quick wins. You look for longer term goals. You figure out how you're going to create your message to earn that buy-in. And then we always continue to evaluate and adjust. So I have a question for you on objective-based drills. I'm very passionate about this. My question for you as educators is, would you ever teach students without creating a lesson plan? Would you ever create a lesson plan without clearly identified learner outcomes? And would you ignore emergent research and best practice recommendations on how to design and deliver that curriculum? And I know the answer to those. The answer to those are all no. Of course you would create a lesson plan and have learner outcomes and look to best practices on how to create that design. So why do we ignore basic educational and curriculum design principles for drills? Your drills have to be objective based. You need goals for your staff, your students, and your administrators in that goal. It's not just a check in the box. We have to shift our mindset and approach drills the same way you would approach any other curriculum in your classroom. So questions for yourself in terms of designing drills and creating objective-based drills. What is statutorily required? So what drills do I absolutely have to do by statute? And then from there, what drills do best practice recommendations say that I need to do? And how many of those should I be doing? Next is, what am I specifically trying to achieve for those students, staff, and administrators within that drill? what information and data am I trying to collect? Again, this is an opportunity for us to continue to improve our systems. It's not just about doing the drill, it's about identifying gaps in our training or our policies in order to be successful in the long term. And then how do I plan to use that information to improve practices, protocols, and or policies? This goes back to our safety teams. I've collected that information. I want to continue to improve. Who do I need to collaborate to make those changes and to have that long-term influence? Andrea is going to provide you with some information that we've created at Blaine County School District. And that's going to include a template of what we require in our emergency binders. We'll give you our drill schedule for Blaine County School District to help you get an idea of where we've landed based off of best practice recommendations on the type and number of drills that we use. And then I gave you our entire folder on our evacuation drills. So this includes the drill schedules, the objective sheets. I talked about objective sheets earlier. So what can those look like? And then I've also provided you with a student discussion PowerPoint. So we use a PowerPoint before every evacuation drill that goes through all of our protocols. It's a really quick, low impact discussion prior to an evacuation drill. But I want you to have that resource as a starting point so that way you can start to get to work. And I'm hoping that we have some questions in the chat that I'm able to answer with the time we have left.
Thank you so much for all of that information. Incredibly valuable. One of the questions was kind of around best practices. So you talked about the drills, the trauma-informed language, things that we can do to help drills be most successful. We want these to be winnable scenarios. Are there places that districts and charters can go to make sure that they are up to date on the best practices, or maybe more of those templates or things that they can do, because we know that they are incredibly busy, have lots of different roles. In addition to the resources we're sharing here, where should they be looking or watching for the latest trends?
Yeah, great question. Well, we're lucky because we have the Idaho School Safety and Security Program, and they have a list of resources and best practice recommendations on their website. They also have some templates. They have training that's available in some of these areas. So that's a real quick, easy place to look. The U.S. Department of Education has put out different guidelines on best practices for emergency operations. For me personally, if I'm trying to collect data on K-12 active shooter events, I use the FBI and alerts data. It's objective. They've clearly differentiated active shooter events from other forms of gun violence. So that way you can clearly start to see some themes related to K-12 and that specific phenomenon. It doesn't include all different types of gun violence that we may experience.
And of course, people like law enforcement, sheriffs, police officers, certainly you get called in at the most extreme moments, but also we know that there are what we would consider smaller, probably more frequent potential risks that happen in the schools. So what about just that idea of vigilance? What would be your recommendation for all staff and teachers and administrators?
Yeah, I'll go back to active shooter events real quick because they're a statistical anomaly, K-12 active shooter events, right? But we know because of the media coverage, because of proximity and all these other factors, that it's high on our list of concerns among our staff and our community and our parents. But with that, the good news is over 90% of K-12 active shooter assailants are current or former students of the site that's targeted. That means in more than any other area, we have an opportunity for prevention to identify those students that are going down the pathway of violence and actually intervene and get them the resources they need before that plan comes to fruition. And so creating a behavioral threat assessment team and using an evidence-based model for that. It's not just about those worst case scenarios. When you have a behavioral threat management team, you're looking at behavior that leads to potential consequences, right? And we all know as educators, behavior is a manifestation of other things that are happening in the home or in that student's life. And the impact that team can have is across your systems it's just absolutely incredible. When you have a good team and a good system in place, it impacts every area of your school. And at the end of the day, we educate our students better. And that's the real goal of school safety.
Well, and to your point about the awareness part, I mean, equally true, administrators are the ones who get to see their staff and their students. And so that survey that you talked about, is that probably the first or the best first step when it comes to perhaps starting a safety or security plan from scratch? I mean, some of the folks that are here watching and listening today may be doing just that. This might be something that they are just now beginning. So would that be your recommendation for the first step, is just to know what exists and where your staff is with all of this?
It has to be, because any of our system, anything we do has to be data driven. And so it has to be the first step in identifying from our staff what those gaps and concerns are. We then take that and we start to compare that to our policy and look in those other areas of best practices and emergent research and empirical evidence to then start to guide us. And it's so easy to do. You do surveys all the time. You create, a 10, 15 question survey that captures the key information. And then, you turn around and start to analyze that within your school teams and your district teams. And the best thing is the school safety councils coming to your school or school safety programs coming to your school every 3 years. So you also get to compare that data to what the state's already providing you. And if you can line those up in terms of a timeline, then it's even better.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sheriff Ballas, Blaine County Sheriff. We appreciate your expertise and your passion for keeping our schools and our students safe. And he has a lot of resources for you, so you don't have to start from scratch. You don't have to do this alone. And we will make sure that you have all of those at the end of this summit. We will make sure that we get those to you in an email. And I know he is somebody who has been willing to help any of the districts and charters that need that. And so we'll make sure you have his contact information as well. Again, Sheriff Ballas, thank you so much for your time today. And as you just heard, vigilance is about awareness, right? That's where it begins. And there is nobody more aware and more in tune with what's going on in our schools than our people, our staff, our educators, our paraprofessionals who are inside the classroom. You get to know your students, you get to know families, you get to know caregivers and parents. And so often you are the first line of defense, because you do recognize those changes, those behavioral patterns. You know when something is not quite right. And of course, as educators, you are far more than just instructors. You are those frontline mentors. That also means that you are the person, the most important person in creating that culture of safety and empowering students, taking those drills seriously, making sure that they do feel safe enough to engage in those in a way that, as the sheriff said, making sure that we are teaching them and helping our responders be able to answer that call during an emergency, should there be one. So we're going to move now to talk about just that idea of the classroom and where that first line of defense starts. And joining us to talk about that is Mike Munger. And he has been working toward safer Idaho schools for more than 2 decades, for 24 years. In fact, he leads the Idaho Office of School Safety and Security for the Idaho Board of Education. So you may be familiar with Mike. The office is tasked with assessing, evaluating, and supporting student safety in every Idaho public school. Student safety is a priority. We know that is a priority for all Idahoans, and the Office of School Safety and Security is responsible for helping schools improve their safety profile by identifying any of those vulnerabilities, recommending effective practices, and supporting local schools to continually improve student safety. So outreach and education is an important part of that awareness. We know that. And so thank you very, very much, Mike, for being here to share your insight.
Thank you, Andrea. And thank you for the opportunity to be able to talk through some of the things that we're seeing as we go throughout the state. Certainly a lot of great information from Sheriff Ballas, and we appreciate the partnership that we have with our local law enforcement officers and agencies throughout this state. One of the things that we've seen again and again as we go through our K-12 schools every 3 years, is that this process of continual improvement when it comes to school safety, it's a group project. There's a lot of people who are involved in this process. There are a lot of really smart people who are working together in this area. And I often am guilty as charged of saying that our office has one of the best responsibilities in all of state government, because I don't ever run into anyone who thinks that our schools need to be less safe. This is a shared responsibility that we have at the state level, at the local level, and really what I want to be able to drill down into today is at the classroom level. What we're seeing when we go out and we do our vulnerability assessments. And because I graduated in the half of the class that made the top half possible, I always like to have the answers prior to the test. And really, that's what our vulnerability assessment is in education language, it's a formative assessment. We're going in to look at the areas where there might be vulnerabilities within our schools, to be able to make recommendations based on best practice and to work towards continual improvement. And as I say, this is a group project, and we always find willing participants when we go out to the local level. Nobody wants to have an unsafe school. But there are some barriers, and Sheriff Ballas touched on some of those, but we're going to be talking strategies today to be able to get around those barriers, and we're going to zoom in a little bit into the heart of the school, the classroom. So one of the things that we do as we go out and we do our vulnerability assessments in all of our schools is we look at individual classrooms, and we love to talk to classroom teachers, and we get a lot of great information, again, about that heart of the school where learning takes place, kind of these homes away from home for a lot of our students. And really what I want to spend our time talking about is 4 areas that we emphasize when we go out and we talk with classroom teachers throughout the state. The classroom teacher has a heavy responsibility. There's no two ways about it. The in loco parenti responsibility associated with those classroom teachers is heavy. And in many ways, they have a lot of challenges associated with just the education process. Then you add on top of that the responsibility for the safety of the students who are in their classroom. And then you add on top of that the coordination with the overall safety and response perspective of the entire school. And then you add on top of that some of the things that Sheriff Ballas was talking about as the community level response capability. That's a lot. And so what we want to be able to do is to reduce that down into achievable, helpful practices that take place within the school. And within the classroom. So first question I ask when I go out and talk with classroom teachers is, do you know what to do in the event of an emergency? Do you know how to evacuate your classroom? Do you know what is the response for an intermediate safety check? Either some of our schools, if they're using the Idaho Standard Response Protocol, they are using the language of hall check. Other places have other language where they need something to be able to kind of stop the movement and motion within the school, make sure everyone is accounted for, but we don't need to go into a full lockdown. And then, of course, the last one is that lockdown is do you know the practical aspects of how to do a lockdown in your classroom? And one of the areas that I would throw out that I often ask questions about is in the event of a substitute teacher who's in that classroom, or in the event of the principal who is also the substitute bus driver, who's also working in the kitchen and also doing educational leadership within their school, and now they've been called into a classroom. Does that person know how to do each of these options-based response protocols? Those are important questions. And those are the kinds of things that we look for in terms of what's happening in that individual classroom. The reality is in schools and in the way we do education in the United States is the classroom is that lowest common denominator of accountability. They know which students are there. They know which students are not there that day. They know which student has stepped out to the speech language pathologist. They know which students have left early for the day because they're headed to a 3-hour bus ride to a basketball game. They know those aspects like no one else within the school. And so those classroom responses become critically important in how we actually manage the overall school response to an incident. So as we're thinking about these types of questions and these responses, one of the things I always ask, especially if I can find a brand new teacher, is, do you know how to do an evacuation? Do you know how to do a hall check, a security hold? Do you know how to do a lockdown? Do you know how to lock your door? Do you actually have the key readily at hand if you need a key to be able to lock your door? And asking those questions really illustrates some of the areas of vulnerability that we sometimes see. So that's one of the things that we always ask questions about. But here's one of the things that's really important. All of these options-based protocols are based on a foundation of situational awareness. What we need is for people to be thinking clearly and accurately in the heat of a moment with incomplete information in an emergency, and to be able to make some simple sounding evaluations. Am I safer where I am than where I'm headed? That's a really important question that is down the road of situational awareness. Is there danger in my immediate classroom? Do I have the ability to secure the space that I'm in? All of those are questions that end up being pushed out to the margin, to that individual classroom teacher, to that paraprofessional who's working with a smaller group for differentiated instruction. All of those questions are pushed out to the very edge of our emergency management envelope. And so do those folks have the ability, have the authority, and have the knowledge to do the things that we've asked them to do? So what are the tools that we look for to be able to boost that particular vulnerability if we see it in place? Sheriff Ballas touched on a couple of these, and hopefully you start to hear some reoccurring themes, because what we're looking at is best practice or effective practice, because we don't have a laboratory environment where we test a lot of these, but these are established standards of care. So if you are having a regular monthly staff meeting, if you are having a quarterly staff meeting, whatever those look like to be able to conduct the business of the school that you're in, is there a standing agenda item for a safety minute? And if we're honest, it always turns into a safety 5 minutes. But how do we begin to kind of continually bring those items up for conversation as we're talking about them? Those are very important. One of the things that we actually find to be very, very helpful are functional exercises. It doesn't need to be a full-scale lights and sirens, clear the airspace type of exercise. It is very helpful to be able to have our staffs, especially down to the classroom level, walk through a 10-minute tabletop. We have a fire drill. Everyone evacuates to the soccer field. Someone is stung by a bee, and that someone happens to be allergic. How do we handle this? And to work that together as a staff. They don't have to be high impact. It's a tool for being able to visualize our responses. And as we move through those types of exercises, it becomes clear that people either are able to do the things we're asking them to do, or they aren't. And we have the ability to take care of those and remediate those issues prior to an actual event. One of the things I would commend to you is your local community partners. If you have a school resource officer, if you have a local police department, local fire, everyone has a county emergency manager in their area. Everyone has local behavioral health team partners, whether they're hyper-local or just kind of local in the state of Idaho is another question. But all of those folks that we can help bring in to raise that awareness of how do we handle these things at the individual classroom level. And again, school level safety team. That helps you develop buy-in. It helps everybody understand the why between the what that you're asking them to do in the event of an emergency, and they can become tremendously effective at the individual school level. Second area that we always ask about is that what we affectionately refer to as that teacher superpower. Nobody knows their students like their classroom teacher. And I'll have a few people raise their hand and say, but what about parents? And what I would have to say is, being a parent myself, I know that there are things that my kid can hide from me, but they sometimes come out in ways that classroom teachers can observe them. And the key is recognizing behaviors of concern. And these don't have to be necessarily narrowly construed as threats of violence to others. Are our staffs trained to be able to recognize students who might be in crisis? There's a lot of good tools out there that we'll talk about when we get to the resourcing section, but are those frontline observers of our students able to recognize when something's amiss, able to recognize changes in behavior? And what that's predicated on is with that last bullet, that culture of shared responsibility. The understanding that every person who's involved in that school community has a responsibility for a safe school. It is not the kind of thing to be able to say, well, this student worries me, therefore I need to send them away to somewhere else or someone else. So understanding that everyone plays a part in that. It may be that my part as a classroom teacher is recognition, and I don't have the tool set to be able to assist anywhere beyond that, but do I at least have the tools to be able to recognize behaviors of concern? That becomes very important. And if we're honest, when schools lean into their strengths, this is one of them. Schools are not great at responding to active violent events. Schools are great about recognizing students in crisis when the crisis is still at a low level and being able to move in and to intervene. And so what we always counsel districts to do is to lean into your strengths. You know kids probably better than any other institution. Let's make use of that strength and that leverage. Once I've recognized a student who may be in crisis or may be exhibiting behaviors of concern, do I have the ability to communicate that to the people who have the ability to intercede? And do I know I have that authorization? That's why I throw that question mark into number 3. Is this something that I need to tell my principal about now? Is this something that I need to tell my principal about at the end of the day? Is this something that I need to tell my principal about at our monthly PLC? And understanding and having those conversations about where to threshold these behaviors of observed concern become very important. Have we pushed that information all the way out to the edge to that classroom teacher to know this is not the kind of behavior I want to find out about on a Friday afternoon at 4:30 after everybody's gone home? This is information I need to know about as soon as it happens or as soon as you observe it. Those are important conversations to be able to have on the front end, and they deal directly with this classroom venue. And the last is, again, that culture of shared responsibility, understanding that everyone has a part to play in this school safety and security improvement. As we continue on, the tools that you can use in this particular area are behavioral threat assessment and management team. Now, that is a heavy lift in some ways. And certainly those are difficult to be able to stand up, but there is a wealth of resources, especially for lower and lightly resourced school districts, to be able to set up kind of what we call thin teams that can then partner with other community agencies or partner with other districts to be able to gain expertise. And there's a lot of strategies associated with that. But having a process by which everyone clearly understands if we start seeing these kinds of behaviors with a particular student, or if we see a change in behavior that indicates a crisis in their life, how are we going to move in to be able to help assist? Having a policy and procedure umbrella that overgirds and protects that team is very important. There's some functional exercises that you can do, again, to be able to walk through fictionalized case studies that are helpful to be able to allow staff to be able to say, oh, okay, so I do have a student in my class who's giving away treasured personal effects. Should that be something that I talk to my principal about? And is it just something that's a right now, or is it a something that's at the end of the day, or is it a something that comes up in the monthly PLC? And then the last I would say is, again, know your community partners. There are lots of folks who can come to play in this particular area when it comes to the individual knowledge of students within their classroom. The reality is students don't exist in a vacuum, and they don't only exist in our classrooms. And so there's a lot of folks who have the opportunity to see into their life sometimes. One of the questions that we ask about our individual classrooms is their physical safety systems. Again, does that classroom teacher have the ability to lock their door? It seems like a simple question. What is the state of the door? Sheriff Ballas talked about having a locked door policy. Is that something that is in place within your district where the doors are kept locked and either can be just slammed closed, so you don't have to worry about any kind of a locking device or finding your keys or having a key card or anything like that? Are they kept locked and closed? And what's the policy of the district when it comes to those kinds of things? It does have operational impacts within the school, but do I have the ability to just create a safe space in my classroom in the event that there is some sort of violent activity going on in the school? Very important. One of the things that we look at is the exterior points of the school. And I know this is Idaho, and it gets real hot all throughout the month of August and all throughout the month of May. And so sometimes we find exterior doors that are propped open. We find windows that are varying degrees of operability, varying degrees of visibility. And those are questions that we really want to be able to take a look at, to be able to make sure that the exterior envelope of our school is secure. And it's only as secure as that one classroom door that has a faulty air conditioner, so the teacher has propped the door open. That is the weak link in the exterior envelope of the school. And the last piece that we would look at is wayfinding. Do we put breadcrumbs out for our emergency responders? Many of you might have seen schools that have room numbers on an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper in the window. That's a great recommendation to allow emergency responders who may not be familiar with the site to quickly orient themselves and to know where they need to be and which face of the building they're looking at and things like that. And the last one is communication systems. Does the intercom work in that classroom? I'm going to let that sink in for just a second, because if we don't have the ability to communicate with our classrooms, we have no ability to control an emergency situation. And so those communication systems, whether you're using an IP-based VoIP enunciation system, whether you're using some sort of a texting-based system, are they working? Do they work at every point? And do people know how to use them? And again, it comes to the question of, are folks affirmatively authorized to be able to initiate an emergency response within their own space? Do I, as a first-year classroom teacher, or even better as a substitute, if I see something through my window that I know I need to lock my school down, do I have the tools to be able to accomplish it? Again, this is often revealed in functional exercises as we look at some of those vulnerabilities. The last thing that I would always ask questions about in that classroom are, what are their communication plans? How do they actually pass information from the people who have it to the people who need it? And there are really three realms. This can go into a lot of detail, but beginning that thought process of, how do I communicate in to out? If I need to notify the office, if I need to notify my parents, if I need to notify 911, do I have the tools that I need to be able to accomplish that? Number two, out to in. Do I have the ability to receive information into my classroom? Is my entire communication system predicated on my cell phone being in my pocket? And do I also have a policy that doesn't allow my cell phone to be out? Those are some of the things that we sometimes run into, is making sure that folks have the ability to do the types of communication that they need. And then the last one would be, do I have the ability to communicate down the hall? Are the internal communication systems working that I need to be able to respond to and notify of an emergency situation that's occurring within my classroom? Here's my note of encouragement, because sometimes this can feel overwhelming. You're not in this alone. There are community emergency responders who are there to be able to assist, but in many ways, the responsibility for classroom safety begins with the classroom teacher and moves up the chain of command from that point. A couple of the allies that I want to make sure that you're aware of is, throughout the state of Idaho, we have school safety and security analysts who are able to assist and to support and to help with planning responsibilities throughout the state. I've thrown our website up there because it's a tremendous repository of effective practice. My email's up there and available to you if you have questions. And certainly our office phone number is there as well. So
awesome.
Some resources that are available to you.
Yeah, we so appreciate that. And we did have a question in the chat. So I want to remind everyone, if you have a question for any of our presenters, please go ahead and put that in the chat box and we will get to those. One of the questions was about resources for functional exercises. Sarah wants to know if you have any of those or fictional case studies that might help with training and helping to empower our staff about these safety measures.
Andrea, those sound like two dynamite things to include in your resource package to be able to send out to schools after we're finished. So yeah, we'll make sure we include those.
Perfect. That's what I like to hear. See, you ask, we answer, and then you shall receive. So we appreciate that, Mike, for being willing to add that into our resource list. And as you said, really, it is about empowering teachers and staff with the training, the tools, the trust. And I really appreciate what you said about lean into your strengths, because you're right. It can feel, I think, overwhelming. I mentioned that with Sheriff Ballas. It feels overwhelming when you get all of these great resources, and these are invaluable tips, but it takes just the one first step to get going, and it's baby steps, but anything that we do today is going to help prepare us a little bit better for tomorrow. So we appreciate you being willing to jump in and help us with those. And again, we will share those resources, and don't hesitate to ask the questions there as we go on. So thank you very much, Mike, for your time. We know that we've been talking about preparation. We've been talking about how to plan, how to train for those just in case scenarios that we want to be ready for. But we also know that even the best preparation can be tested when something significant happens or it's in a moment of crisis. And it is during a crisis when communication matters most. And you've heard that theme, communication, how we connect with our people, and what are those systems in place that allow us to get the right information to the right people at the right time in the right way. And that can make all the difference in an emergency. And it needs to be clear, calm, coordinated communication, and that can change the outcome. So this next conversation, I'm going to introduce Dawn Shumway, someone who knows firsthand what effective communication means in an emergency and the difference that it can make. It absolutely can save lives. There are two major 911 organizations. There's NENA, which is the National Emergency Number Association. And then there's also APCO, it's the International Association of Public Safety Communications Officials. And Dawn is the president of both of these for the Idaho chapter. She's also the 911 manager at the largest emergency communications center in Idaho at the Ada County Sheriff's Office. She has more than 22 years of 911 dispatching experience. Dawn also speaks on stages across the country about connecting communities with first responders and delivering information quickly. Today, she's here to share the expertise with us. Dawn, tell us about keeping people safe during an emergency through communication.
Yeah, so a lot of people have a lot of myths. And so that's what I'm really excited to be able to have this chance to be able to speak with everyone and just kind of explain some things about 911. And I am lucky enough, I partner with some nonprofits, one of them 911 Wonder Women, and other organizations within the 911 ecosystem. And I get to travel and I get to see 911 centers across the nation. And in addition to our state here in Idaho. And so I'm excited to share some of the things that might help bridge the gap of what you guys can expect when you call 911. I'm going to just share my screen with you 1 second. Okay, so with this, I put up my contact information so that you guys have it. So my email address, super easy. So it's dawn@911wonderwoman.com. And that's the organization I work with as a nonprofit. And then you can also catch me on LinkedIn. So if you have like follow-up questions, I do speaking all the time. So I'm happy to come out to your guys' school or do different things like that. But there was a lot of things that we're talking about with locations.
Dawn,
and
I'm
this
going to
one was
interrupt
really
you.
interesting because I don't know if everybody knows about what 3 words. So this is something when you call 911 that is
Dawn, can you
displayed
hear
to your
me?
911 dispatcher. But when you guys have that internal communication, when you're trying to discuss stuff, I love the ideas that we heard before already about the posting, the room number on the outside of your window. But this one, and I know you talked about it before too, Andrea, with what 3 words and different stuff. But when you have this school, so I have a picture of, this is Mountain High School.
We're having trouble with your screen, Dawn. I'm not sure if you were able to hear me, and I'll let people know here. We're going to try to get this corrected.
Yeah, let me fix it. Can you see it now?
Yes, now we can. Perfect. We are good to go. Thank you very much.
Does it look like you can see
Okay,
it?
Dawn, yes, we're able to see it. So yes, you can go ahead, and I think we should be ready to go.
Okay, perfect. Sorry about that. Yeah, so
We're
what
very
three
good.
words? So it's really great. So here's just like an example of one of the schools, right? So when you have a school and someone's like, "Oh my gosh, I need help at the field." So this works in bigger crisis situations and even smaller crisis situations. And so it's like, okay, which field? And you're like, the small field, the big field, and it may make sense to you guys on terms that you use, but when you're trying to communicate with emergency responders, with your 911 dispatcher, or even just with parents or other people, this is actually going to be such a great resource. So earlier it talked about like, hey, what do we do with parents? How do we navigate? Where are we telling them to get the kids? You'd be surprised that in emotional situations and then in this crisis, it's hard to focus and it's hard to think. I mean, I bet you could ask somebody right now what's north, east, south, and west, and they'd be like, hold on, give me a second. And so if people have a hard time orienting themselves, even in just like a regular player, like I haven't had caffeine yet today, think of in that emergency situation, what we could do to help empower them to be a little bit better. So what three words basically maps out a 3 meter by 3 meter address. And I'm fearful to switch to show the next, like a different window. So we'll see if it works. But I wanted to show you their website. So let's see if that does it. Can you see the website or no? If not, I can tell people to go there. It looks like you can see it. So basically, what three words, it makes things easier to communicate. So if you need parents to be sent, hey, parents, while you're in communicating, I need you guys to go to this what three words location. So this is stuff that you can help with your parents in education. This is stuff that you can help with each other. And so you're going to give them a specific what three words. So you kind of have this picture here. This is of a beach, and it's showing you that like these three words, that means that exact spot. Those three words mean that exact spot. So it's hard on that earlier slide when I gave you, if you're sending people to, 2000 South Millennium Drive, it's like, well, then where specifically? And that's what this does. It eliminates the confusion. So if you look at this stadium, that really also captures it. So when you're like, go to the visitor entrance, even if you're saying visitor entrance 2, what does that mean? And so when it's like, but no, this specific three words, that's where you're going. So what three words is such a great tool, and what an easy thing for you guys to practice at your guys' schools during drills, whether it's even just like a fire alarm. Hey, everyone, we have a fire alarm. We need you to go to this location, and so forth. It's just a clear, easy way to communicate and bridge that. And so it's really great. It's free. And so you guys can download the app. You don't have to have the app for 911 to be able to see it, but it's so purposeful and it's so useful. And it's stuff that you guys can communicate easily with each other, with parents on your messaging, with parents, what you're putting out on socials. If you're trying to direct people to a specific location, it solves so many problems with that. So it's pretty nifty. I think you guys should check it out. It's helped us in so many moments. We had a moment where we had a woman at the Eagle State Park that had needed help. And so at Eagle State Park, it's like, okay, where, by the walkway, what does that mean? By the dirt road. And so this eliminates all that confusion. As you can see here in this picture, where it just gives 3 clear words and it's saying that's the spot that you're going to go to. So it's super useful. I highly recommend it, and different things like that. One of the other things, so to kind of jump back, so that's something actionable that you guys can do right now. And I'm flipping back just from their side. Sorry. Another one for you guys to do is to go to emergencyprofile.org. And while this loads, so I'll talk about it. So emergencyprofile.org is something, again, that's free for you. And that's something that you can share out to your at the time of when you're sending out all the school information. Like when you give that nice big packet, like, hey, welcome to school. That's something easily you can include in then. And it's also something that you can share out in these moments of practice, all the other stuff, to help get everyone to register. And what it does profile.org. It basically pumps whatever data you want into 911, what they're going to see through things like Rapid SOS. It's a free profile for you to put in, and you can put as much or as little of information that you want in there. So, and it's not searchable. So you can't be like, oh, I'm worried about putting this in there because I don't want them to have it. But let's say in this situation, as we prepare, we want to have all our emergency contacts listed in there. What a great way. So it's all pumped in. So when you make that call, we have all that data instantly available to us in the 911 center, because we're not going to be able to spend a lot of time on the phone in these situations. And so you want to pump as much data instantly as possible. And that's what this profile does. And so whether you're in Nampa, whether you're at Canyon County, whether you're in Ada County, and even in other states, this is used by, it's used in most 911 centers across the nation and even internationally. So it's a really great tool for you guys to use to pump whatever data. So just have everyone go sign up. That's one extra layer of safety that we can help provide to our community, to our parents, to our students, all that stuff. Okay. The other thing is this one's kind of a heavy bomb to talk about, but knowledge is power. We need to be ready for 911 not to answer. One of the myths is that just call 911 and they'll be able to take care of us. Call 911, they'll walk you through with what to do. And in most situations, that's absolutely true. We are trained professionals ready to help you, and we handle everything. Okay. But in a massive incident, there's such an influx of calls that two things can happen. One, a cell tower can get overwhelmed. When a cellular phone tower gets overwhelmed, it's not able to place those 911 calls anymore. And so it has to route to either a non-emergency line or route somewhere else. And that can kind of be complex. We have 3 centers in Idaho that have put AI on their non-emergency lines, which is, fine for them as they're trying to help triage and handle calls and do the best decisions that they have with their resources. But it just may not come in as what you're expecting when you're dialing 911. So just know, one of the steps is they talked about having a district safety team. Make sure your 911 reps are included in that. And so then they can help fill in the gaps of what it looks like, what their resources are, how many lines they have available, even when someone does call 911. Does it roll over to the next county? What does that look like? So, but just be ready. And obviously in these massive incidents, we just can't get to everyone at the same time or even stay in the line the whole time. And we have to triage and stop the threat. And then we have to work on other stuff as far as triaging patients and so forth. Okay. And one of the things that you can do is say, hey, you know what? You can text 911. So I can help better triage calls when I'm handling a few texts at the same time and maybe one audio call. So if you can't get through on the phone, just make sure that everyone knows that they can text 911. You just text 911, just like you text anything else. And so that's a great resource to have. And again, this isn't to stop you from calling 911. It's just be ready. So don't, because the last thing I'd want for you to have is more panic when you're like, oh my gosh, I can't get through. And as you dial, don't hang up and retry again. All that stuff messes with the system, and it doesn't cause it to go fluidly. So when you dial, stay on the line, text, all that stuff, communicate with your dispatcher, all that stuff. I'm going to answer one of the questions Sarah had. So we can name locations on the map that appears when we enter the location on what 3 words, and people can access those to see what we call specific locations. So yeah, so like we've had callers before say, I'm at these what 3 words. Which is really great. So we're like, oh, we know exactly where you are. We have that ability to take those what 3 words and pump it right in. Now, what 3 words, testing it out, it works better outside than it does indoors. But obviously, so when you're at your fields, tennis courts, or if you want to send parents to a location, you can have that pre-mapped out. Like, I know this safety mark where I'm going to send parents, hey, you're going to go to the north fields over here, and here's the what 3 words so you know about it. But yeah, so fun fact, I guess, the Queen of England, when she had passed, a lot of people wanted to pay their respects. So at the funeral, instead of just saying show up at this address, because that would have created mass confusion, they consistently updated the end of the line with the what 3 words. So people knew exactly where to go to wait in line. It's that helpful. So, and that's kind of interesting. But yeah, you can share it, but also it's an easy way for you guys to make sure you're communicating and saying the same terminology with other people, those what 3 words. So good question. Other things. So when we talk about the communication aspect, One of the ways that you can help 911 is making sure you have that swift, clear, focused, and actionable communication. What do you want people to do, right? Because if you're not answering on social media, on your website, and you're not directing parents what to do, or other, like the public, other things, they're going to panic. When they panic, guess who they call? 911. And that doesn't help us at all. So you guys can actually help be a lift, help take off the burden that's of the influx of calls that we're going to have in this moment by making sure you're telling people exactly where to go. And when I say the actionable part, that's really important. So if you want to say like, hey, like there's a fire, the people are like, oh no, like what do I need to do? So you need to say like, hey, there's a fire, it's maintained. You can help by avoiding the area. So make sure there's an actionable piece attached to it, regardless of what kind of crisis moment we were dealing with, whether it was active shooter, whether it was, a weather incident, whether it was, even a fire, different things like that. But just make sure you're communicating with people with what they want to do. And then obviously, like from my side, it's always great to avoid knee-jerk reactions. Like don't point fingers. That's just like a tidbit of help. I've seen in other mass incidents where people are like, oh, well, people should have been better at this. Any of that confusion in those moments, it's not purposeful, and it doesn't help with the messaging that we want to achieve with stuff like that. So hopefully that answers some questions as far as that goes. And then work with your local emergency management. So that should be part of your district safety team, your local emergency management. Who is sending out your guys's reverse 911? Who is sending out your stuff? What do you have? Like, so is it code red? Is it crisis 24? Is it like what kind of emergency notification systems are in your area? And make sure that everyone's signed up for them, that people have it, and that everyone's trained on all sides in your safety teams and the schools, and they know how to do it. Whether you're using school messaging, where you're saying, "Hey, we're pumping it with all of them," which would be my recommendation. I mean, it's better to over communicate that same clear, focused, actionable message versus to someone like, "I didn't get it. What do I do?" A lot of people take information in different avenues. Whether people are like, "I'm not on socials." So just make sure that you are casting that wide net and you're catching everyone. And then also, one of the things I find helpful is take a tour of your local 911 center. So if you guys haven't, make that part of your things. Like, hey, I want to see, what are our resources? What are our abilities? What are this? What do we have? That is one of your resource buckets that I think people just imagine is like completely taken care of and different things. But sometimes what they don't know, is that like, oh, I didn't know this is what our center was. I think it could help fill in some gaps and help as we make actionable decisions to help better protect our students, that you'll be better prepared. So do you know, like, oh, that's how this flows. Oh, this is how many dispatchers we have. Oh, I didn't realize this. So I highly suggest doing that. And also, like at my center, we do tours with students and schools and different stuff like that. So it's a lot of engagement, partnership, because this is really a community action for us to be able to do these things, right? So I like that, all that stuff. Let's see what else we have. And then be ready for the help. One thing is that sometimes people have a plan for that immediate part, but then they forget about what happens when the public's like, oh no, like I'm so sad for you guys. I want to help. And again, when people want to help and they don't know who to call, it's going to call us at like 911. It's going to call public safety. It's going to overwhelm your school lines. It's going to like, people don't know where to go. So you have it directed. So as you're building plans, don't just build a plan on what to do, build a plan on what to do after the event. So a good example, unfortunately, obviously we had up in Kootenai County, we had our incident with the firefighters who were ambushed during that awful situation. And their lives were taken. And so, but the community was like, oh my gosh, how do I help? And so the last thing we want, like for me, like in a public safety sense, is I don't want the people who had to endure awful tragedy now to kind of be overwhelmed. Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I have so much help. Like, how do I triage it? Where do I go? So just make sure you also have a plan for that. Okay. Do we have volunteers in place? Do we have where would we direct people? So one of the things is what phone number should we direct them to call? So it's not overwhelming, because as this went viral, which these situations can, you'll have a lot of people, which is so great, who want to help. We just don't want that to be an extra burden on top of the other burdens that you're working on. Make it be a positive thing. Make it be a resource. And I think that's one thing that's kind of missed But especially here in Idaho, one thing that's really special about Idaho is how much help people do want to give. People, that's one of the first things they're like, how can I help? What a special area that we live in, to be able to have that and different stuff as far as that. I wanted to make sure that I left some time for like questions and answers. So you guys can ask me about different incidents, different things, like what happened, like anything 911, or like in a massive situation that you guys are like, how would this handle? How would this work out? How would we do this? Different stuff. Is there any questions? You can either put it in the chat, or if you had other questions, but I hope you guys use those two things. So what 3 words and emergencyprofile.org. Really great resources for you guys to be able to help with, to push out.
An incredible resource. And
I don't see anything else. Sarah, you've been so helpful. I'm like waiting for another question from you. So.
Okay.
And I'll leave there's my contact information again.
Yes.
If you guys need it. I am passionate about helping with schools and different stuff as far as that goes. So please,
sure. And
reach
you can
out
also
if
help.
you want any help or different things as far as that goes.
I know, Dawn, you
one
also
of the things
will
that I
help
often go
them.
teach with is 0 suicide kits, which is kind of a fun thing that I do. So if you didn't know that about me, there you go. What questions do you have?
Awesome. Thank you, Dawn. I appreciate you being willing to share this. And I know that you are passionate about connecting with students or with schools, and also would do your part to connect. We have people on from across the state. And so while you work in Ada County, and that's where primarily your job is, but you also represent APCO and NENA across the state. And so I know that you'd be willing to help connect any of these districts and charters to their own dispatch centers or to their own emergency managers. And so we will make sure that we use that contact information, share that in our list of resources that we will share with everyone at the end of this summit. So thank you, Dawn, very much for sharing all of that great information. That what 3 words, as Dawn said, even if you're using it for your family or for your events at your school, it doesn't always have to be in an emergency, but it gets you that pinpoint location within a 10 by 10 foot section of land. And so it's a great resource, one that you can put there in your phone and just have it just in case, because again, as we said, that communication can make all of the difference. And when you think about it, when there is a crisis, communication is leadership. And it's often the very first thing that you can do. We want it to be calm, clear, make sure that we're giving people an action, giving them something that they can do that does often calm down the situation. And so in our resources, we'll also share with you a crisis communication plan, because just like our planning for our drills and for our, things inside the classroom, whether it be the alerts, for a possible active shooter or for other emergencies, we also know we have things that are far more common that are weather emergencies or maybe medical emergencies, something that might mean that we have to move students from one place in the school to another, or we might have to, evacuate an area and let parents know where to pick children up, what's happening. That link between the school and the community is going to be incredibly important. And so we also have resources for that. And here at the State Department of Education, we are happy to help with those crisis communication plans. We have those resources available. And so we will definitely share those with you as well, because communication, of course, in those first moments is absolutely critical. In addition to communication, we know that learning from experience is also one of the most invaluable things that we can do. Our next speaker does not shy away from those difficult topics. Chad Martin has served as the superintendent of the Jefferson School District for the past 6 years. He guided the district through the response and recovery following the tragic shooting at Rigby Middle School. That was in May of 2021. And he now leads efforts to build trust, resilience, and a culture of care and safety within the school community. And these are incredibly very powerful messages and things that he is willing to share with you as someone who's been there, done that, and continues to hope that these lessons help others. So Chad, we appreciate you so graciously agreeing to share some of these lessons you've learned with all of us.
Thanks, Andrea, and thanks to everyone that's presented before. A lot of the things that I share will be echoed because some great advice and things that we learned firsthand. But I am, like Andrea said, I'm always willing to share our experiences in hopes that it will better prepare other districts for the unfortunate events that do happen. And it's not always an active shooter. We know that there's all kinds of things that happen within our communities that we have to be prepared for, to communicate with. And so I'm going to share my screen. Andrea, there you go. I got it. Thank you. So this is some news coverage of our event, and I just include that to show the impact that it has not only on a school or a district or a community, but we know this is a nation and even a worldwide concern. So what can we do to better prepare our schools? And I read a book a while back. It's called Left of Bang, and it's a Marine story, and they were really having a difficult time with their Marines. They were very prepared. When bullets started flying, they could really lay down the hate and they could take care of business. But as what was happening is they were getting surprised by these. So they really put effort into what they called left of bang before these incidents happened. And they trained these people to really look for things that could prevent them, or at least identify them before it happened. So I thought, well, how does that apply to us? Because as districts, we were very good at practicing going through reunification, communication, things that happen after the fact. And we did some drills and stuff before the fact, but really digging into how can we prevent these things from happening. So as I go through the presentation today, it'll be kind of that lens. We'll talk about left of bang and right of bang. If it will let me advance my slides. Let's see. There we go. So this is kind of where I saw that we were before we had our shooting. We had, I would say, what most districts had at the time. We had our school counselors, we had PBIS, see something, say something. We had SROs in the building. We talked about these things. And then we did training right of bang on reacting to those situations, responding to those situations, reunification, recovery, but very high level, not really getting into the depth. So I really want to just dig into, and we'll talk about where we are now, some things that we've changed, but probably focus on just a few of those that I think are really high leverage points, and some of which have already been discussed. So right of bang, our lockdown procedures, which I view that as both right of bang and left of bang, because obviously that happens before an incident, but it also carries throughout the incident and the choices that are made there. So I'll talk a little bit about that. And then some adjustments to reunification plans, and then those law enforcement relationships that really impact, again, both. They need to happen before, but is where they really come into play is after an incident. And what have you done to have those relationships so you're ready to work together in the immediate aftermath and the weeks, months, years down the road as well. So here's some things that we made, some changes left of bang. Locked doors, that's been talked about a couple of times. And I've had the opportunity to present a version of this presentation many times throughout the state and throughout the nation. And one thing that keeps coming up is locked doors. Something that really stuck with me when I was in Orlando was a presenter talking about, said, you know what, do not spend a dime on school safety if you're not willing to lock your doors. And that really hit me. And we already had this policy in place. We put this in place after the incident that we had. And now the expectation is every minute of every day, more or less, other than passing times, but we are teaching behind locked doors. We've gotten rid of magnets. We don't have magnets. We don't have devices. We just want doors locked. And we understand that it's a convenience and inconvenience. And we had some pushback when we started that because, well, what about when kids go to the bathroom? And I understand that. But we worked through that. And now it's just what we do. Are there times that a door gets left unlocked? Yes, but now it's an anomaly. It doesn't happen very frequently. Once a month, our administrators go and do door checks within their buildings, and they use this as a celebration point with their schools and say, hey, we were 98% or we were 100% or great job and identifying those things. And then those that didn't have it, they'll talk to it. And there's times that doesn't happen. If we have an adult reading out in the hall with kids and kids coming and going, we allow that door to be open because we have an adult there monitoring it. But the rule is we teach behind locked doors. And again, I can't emphasize that enough. Really, if you're not willing to do that, there's really not a lot we can do, because we know that in every situation, any time saved saves lives. And that's what we want to do, is save lives. And so one more barrier that we can create will save lives in an event. And so if there's one takeaway you get today, one easy thing you can implement, that's what I would say, is teach behind locked doors. I think as a community, or as a school community, we do a pretty good job of exterior doors. But we all know that, especially at high schools, when we have at our high school multiple buildings, kids coming and going all of the time. So we can't even guarantee those are always locked, but we do a pretty good job with that. But that next layer of security is classroom doors. Another thing that we did, we added resource officers. That goes back to that relationship with our law enforcement. We've been able to add 2 resource officers since our incident. We had 2 at the time, and now we have 4 throughout our district. We had a safety security audit, multidisciplinary threat assessment team. That's been a huge thing that we've really worked on. We've had patron communities. Communication, that's something I really want to talk about. Communication is so crucial, and it's a left of bang thing, because we've got to communicate what we're going to do amongst our staff, amongst our students. We have to do training. We have to work with law enforcement and even our community. And so making sure we have ways to communicate, not only when the event happens, but before that, but also when the event happens, which was, Mike talked about that as well. How are we communicating? And so we've got a few things in place now. We've got an app we use, a panic button app, that every teacher and every staff member has on their phone. They can push a button. That button will connect to 911 and also alert everyone in the building. And we don't use that just for active shooter. You can do it for medical emergency and identify what it is. You can do it just as a notification tool too, for things that are non-emergency. We have the Stop It app, where our students use that on a regular basis to report any activity that helps us be aware that, and very rarely is it something like a gun in the building. In fact, I don't know if we've ever got that. But as what we get is, there's going to be a fight after school. Somebody's vaping in the bathroom. My friends has been talking about suicide. And I truly believe that communication tool has saved lives, because we are able to act on those things and build those relationships. We put Hope Squad in our buildings, and SOAR, which is a social emotional thing, and really focused on those relationship pieces that we can have a high impact, that we can build relationships with kids, that we can identify when things are changed in their lives. And it's those soft skills that I think really help. And it's not always identifying the kids, it's also creating a culture in the school where it's okay to have those conversations. It's okay to treat each other well. It's okay to ask how we're doing. We implemented dads on duty and morning greeters. So we have adults in the building that come in and just are there for kids. Obviously, they go through background checks. We build relationships with them, but they come in and greet kids and are just there at those times of the day where we have a lot of things going on. Before school, we have a couple that come in at lunches, not so much after school, but lunches and before school, we get a lot of support there. Really at the middle school level is where we've seen that the most, which has been interesting. And some of those have been with us for years, and they just come and they're present there, and they build relationships with kids. We have a clear backpack policy. That wasn't popular. We actually went to a no backpack policy. So our shooting happened in May, and in September the next year, we actually had another gun incident where we had a middle school girl that walked into the bathroom and saw another middle school girl crying, and she went and told the counselor that she probably needed some help. When the counselor went in, the girl had a handgun in there, and the counselor cleared the bathroom, went and got resource officer. We actually had 4 resource officers in the building because they were preparing for a lockdown drill, and they went, and that was actually handled very textbook. But we knew that we had 2 incidents now where guns were brought into the building with backpacks. And so we actually made national news again when we went to no backpacks. And so our kids were very creative with what they did and how they brought things into the their books. They brought sleds and aquariums and anything but a backpack, and it was kind of a fun thing. But we've transitioned that to clear backpacks, and we're not foolish enough to believe that we couldn't still get a weapon in the building. But as what we've learned through that is that kids feel better, and especially in those first year or two after the incident, the kids didn't have to wonder what was in the bag next to them. So it was more of a mental health thing and truly a physical barrier to getting a weapon in the building. We've have mental health counselors in some of our schools. We haven't been able to do that with all of them, but we've been able to add agencies come in and actually work from our buildings, and we provide space for them. And so we don't have to pull kids out of school, and parents don't have to provide transportation to get access to these counselors. So that's been very beneficial, and we've had to continue to increase time on that because they're just full all of the time. So these are a lot of things that we've added to this, and I'll get into a couple other logistical things that have made a big impact. One of which is I want to focus on. So this is kind of where we are now, and I'll pick a few of these out, but you can see we've added a lot of things here to truly try to surround our kids with support. Can I guarantee that our schools are 100% safe? Absolutely not. I walked over to the high school today, and there was a doorstop in the exterior door propping it open. Like, things still happen. I understand that, but we can do everything in our power. So the one thing that we've done is we've really looked at our lockdown drills, and we've adopted the ALICE protocol through Navigate 360, which is a protocol. There's many that are effective, but the one thing that I think we've really done well is trained our staff on that, and we speak the same language now. Before, we used to have code blue that would mean something and code red that would mean something, and it would mean something in one building and something else in another building. And so a substitute that went between buildings or district office staff that went between buildings really had no idea what it meant. But we came to the realization that we are not fooling anybody with codes. If we have someone in the building that wants to do has ill intent, if we say code red, they're going to know it's about them. So as part of the ALICE protocol, ALICE stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Communication, and Evacuate at the end. So the communication piece is huge. So we've got rid of all of our codes, and now simply we say lockdown, ALICE protocol lockdown, and then we continue to communicate. And we say, we have an intruder with a red shirt that's carrying a handgun in the library. We would be that direct, because that informs all of our other staff of what they can do. And ALICE, you can lock down, you can evacuate, you have options, and we empower our teachers to have options. So if my door is next to the library, I'm probably going to lock down. If I'm in another building, or if I'm at the other end of the building, I may choose to evacuate. And we empower our teachers to make those calls. And that's another something I think it was Mike that talked about was, do your teachers have the power to make these decisions? And that's a change that we made. Absolutely, yes. Every teacher, every staff member has the ability to call lockdown at any time in any of our buildings. Now, obviously, we train on what would trigger that, but that's, again, saving time saves lives. And in our shooting, what happened is we had it was actually a very quick, for national standard, very quick lockdown, but a teacher called the office secretary answered, got the administrators got the information, and then called lockdown, whereas it could have been instantaneous. Would it have changed anything? I don't know, but it definitely wouldn't have hurt anything as well. So that communication and that trust that we put in our teachers, but with that comes training. And with the ALICE protocol, we train. We just actually had professional development days earlier this week, and that's what we did. Every building, we receive training, and we don't do this intensive training every time, but about every 3 years now. Well, it's the second time we've done it. It was 3 years ago we did it. We do hands-on training that's very scripted from ALICE, but we have Nerf guns, we have scenarios, we practice locking down, we practice barricading doors. We teach older students and staff members how to control the situation and to combat that. And so very in-depth training that with our staff members. On the years that we don't do that in depth, we still do we dedicate time at the beginning of the year and throughout the year to scenario-based training and to be able to really walk through those situations. And so I think that that's a huge step that we've taken to really empower our teachers to know exactly what to do. And so, the question was asked, do your teachers know how to lock their doors? Do they know what to, and I can say that in our district, yes, they do. Well, their doors are already locked. So yes, they do, but they also know how to respond. And sometimes they don't like the fact that we don't say, okay, lock your doors. It's here's a scenario you need to make the best decision for you and take in consideration. Do you have 20 kindergarten kids that you've got to evacuate if you choose to evacuate, or is it 30 seniors in high school? And it's different. And there's not necessarily a right or wrong. You make the call. And it's hard for some teachers because they like to be told what to do. But without fail, they always feel that the empowerment has really provided them with a level of security. And so my advice would be, whatever protocol it is, make sure that your teachers have options, but they have trainings on what that actually is and what they can do and what would trigger those responses. And then jumping over to right obeying, our reunification process. So we were able to do this hands-on twice within just a few months. And both of them look very different. The first one, we had to evacuate our students out of the building because it was a crime scene and take them to our high schools on the adjacent property. So we took them there. Reunification happened there. Truly, it happened very well considering that we hadn't prepared for it. We just had good people, but it happened very well. The second time when we still did a reunification with the other incident, but that happened within the building and that looked different. And truly, I don't think that you can ever practice this in a real life scenario because you don't have the emotions involved. You don't have the intensity of that situation that you really can't understand until you have law enforcement there carrying their machine guns across your campus and have hundreds of parents there. But in both places, it looked different, but it also went fairly smooth. But really evaluate those protocols. One thing that we found in the second event is in our effort to make sure that we did everything perfectly, we bottlenecked the process. We had teachers checking kids out of their room, and then we had them coming to the front doors and we checked them out again, and then they went out and gave them to the parents. But we realized that having that double checkout, which may have been good, was unnecessary, and we created this bottleneck at the second checkout point, so it was taking a long time. So in the process, we learned we've got to be flexible. We got rid of that. And we checked them out of the classroom. We got them to parents. Just last week, we had a district level practice on the reunification. We did a mock drill. We didn't actually bring parents, but we had all of the district involved in that. And one thing that we learned is the school involved can't be in charge of the reunification process. There's too many unknowns. There's too many emotions. There's too much going on. So as a district staff, meaning my directors, but also our business department, our maintenance department, our technology department, some of the special ed staff, we step in and do that. And so we did a mock drill last week, and we set up in the parking lot. We had our maintenance bring the canopies, technology set up our mobile Wi-Fi. They set up our computers. We have a system where we print badges, 2 badges, one for the parent, one for the kid, and we went through that. And so that hopefully we never have to use it, but if we do, that training is so crucial. And we include law enforcement in that. Any lockdown drill we do it with law enforcement. They come with us. They actually kind of run the drill after the lockdown's called. Some of our administrators train with law enforcement. We go to the range, we shoot with them. We do active shooter drills in the school. So there's a lot of things that we've done. Really, there's so much to talk about, so many lessons learned. This kind of presentation is usually an hour or two, so I've condensed it into 15 minutes, but I'm very happy to work with districts, answer any questions. We are by no means experts, but we've gone through it. And so we have unfortunate experience that has helped us to shape where we're at as a district. I feel like we're better than we were by far, but by no means perfect. And there's always places that we can be better, but we continue to work. We've worked with Mike at the state. We've appreciated their input, but feel free to reach out, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you so much, Superintendent Chad Martin. And we do have a couple of questions in the chat that I want to make sure you see. One is, how did you work through moving to locked doors without magnets, things like that, that perhaps there is some staff resistance or just not sure how to make that move happen? What worked for you?
Well, honestly, our districts were probably a little more prepared for it because of what we had gone through.
Sure.
And there's been very few times as a superintendent that I've said, this is what we're going to do it. But that was one of them. It was a kind of a non-negotiable. This is an expectation. And we had the research to back it up. And we had 80 to 90% buy-in. There was some pushback, and it was more of an inconvenience, but really not a fun thing to say, but it's not as inconvenience as dead children. And that's kind of where we got to. And at this point now, we don't hear that anymore. But admittedly so, our district is more prepared for it. They've seen it, they understood it because we've lived it.
Another question that we had come through, which is who would charters partner with to manage notification or reunification rather when we're just one school?
Yeah, that one I think is a challenge because and we have a unique situation. Like we have one school that's probably 20 minutes away from anywhere else, so they would have to start that process. So obviously I don't have all the answers, but I think it's something that you think through, and I think you have to have very defined roles so that if it is just one school and you are involved emotionally, you can still function because you've trained it and you know exactly what my role is. One thing you can't plan for are there casualties of those people? So you need to have people in backup roles as well. An example that, because we weren't prepared for that the first time, we kind of just naturally did that, but we expected our secretaries to have those lists printed. Well, one, they weren't in an emotional state to print lists. They had been watching people get shot on a monitor in their office. And so to expect them to now go and function in that capacity, and two, we weren't allowed back in the building. So they didn't have access to their office. And so we took that over to the district office. But that was kind of a lesson learned. And that's what really pushed us to realize we've got to have a plan in place that we don't expect those that are victims to do that.
Yeah. And I think that's one of the most invaluable things we can do is to talk about this. As it isn't easy to talk about. It certainly was an incredibly difficult situation, but taking these lessons and moving them forward and finding ways to do it just a little bit better next time, I think makes all the difference. And so we very much appreciate your willingness to share that. And of course, your willingness to share and connect with other districts and charters, not only just in Idaho, but across the country to make sure that we are all keeping our students and our staff safer. So thank you very much, Superintendent Martin, for being here with us today and sharing your story. We are going to wrap up today's session, and we want to bring back in our State Superintendent, Debbie Critchfield. During the summit, Superintendent, we did have a message that probably is best answered by you rather than our presenters, and it was that the safety directors, not just one job in the district. Often this is someone who has a full-time job, but then has added this title or this role onto other full-time work, and it's given to somebody who is already doing a lot. So will the state ever fund or issue a mandate for a security officer in each district? Can you answer that or speak to that?
First of all, I think that it's an important question. As we look around the state, I am confident that most of our districts and charters are doing that. They are assigning very specific responsibilities and training onto someone that is not coming from that area of expertise and training. I think it's a great consideration of having something very specific in the district. And listening to Superintendent Martin previously, they adjusted. They thought that they had the right people in the right places or assumed some of these things would take place. When you're in it, then you learn some things. And I think hearing from him, it's a great opportunity for local boards and charters to have that conversation. I don't know what funding would be available, but I think identifying a staff member that can go and get that training. I know with Mike Munger's shop, they're so great to come out and work. They're also not going to sit on the doorstep knocking on the door. They are there to be invited and to come and want to participate. And I think the elements of decision making at the leadership level at the district is important, and this is a priority enough that I would really encourage our local leaders to think in those terms. Who is fulfilling these assignments? What can we do within the structure that we currently have to ensure that the right attention is given there, and it's not just oh yeah, and we have somebody that does this other thing.
Great, wonderful. They also, if you have any other final thoughts you want to share as we bring this School Safety Summit to a close.
Mostly, I want to say thank you. I have taken so many notes as the presenters have talked, and I think Andrea, for our team, thinking about how we chunk out some of these things. So much information. I hope that there is at least one thing that can be incorporated as a change or an update or something that's expanded upon. As each of our presenters talked, there were things that really stuck out to me. And I guess my final note, the most simple thing, and what I've heard from this group today and what I've heard from those who nationally have gone into places after school violence has taken place, Parkland shooting, some of the others, the one thing that is the consistent thread is securing the perimeter, locking the doors, not having the backpack prop open the gym door or the rock or some of these things. And I see them as I travel around the state, and there's certainly no judgment that goes with it. I understand the inconvenience part, but consistently that one thing costs nothing. And I also really keyed in to, and I think Sheriff Ballas said that, and I know Superintendent Martin talked about that. I appreciate Mike Munger coming in with the thought of conflicting policies. If the protocols and the procedures are on your phone, but we have no cell phone policies, we need to rethink that. What does that look like? And as we take a look at parts that we can address, knowing that there are some resources, but all the things that we talked about today were designed to have you think about what you can do without additional dollars coming in. Thank you for the expertise. Thank you for the care that goes into this topic. It is absolutely critical. We've got experts in the state, people that are volunteering their time and information so that we can learn and be better. And thank you, Andrea, for organizing us all.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And I do want to also point out that Mike, you just mentioned Mike, and those resources available from the State Board of Education. He said that those charters, that question about charters getting support for reunification and things like that, he said that his office is there and more than willing. They have analysts to help with that, to explore your specific scenario. So certainly that is a resource that is available to all districts and all charters. And so please feel free to reach out to him. And again, we will be sharing lots of resources that we talked about today. We will be sharing those with you. For you, those of you who've registered, we will share those with you by email, the email that we sent all of this information to. And of course, we will have lots of these resources available as well through our newsletter and on our website, our social media channels. So we do hope that you're following the Idaho Department of Education and all of our social media channels, because we are hoping to do a great job of sharing information, really giving you the information and the resources and the support that you need to do the great work that you do every single day. And we hope that today you take away a couple of strategies, but also just a reminder that it's really that purpose that unites us, every student deserving to a safe environment where they can learn and grow and thrive. And that is why we are here. And so hopefully some of what we learned today will help us do that just a little bit better starting immediately. We want to say a very, very special thank you to all of our presenters, everyone who was here today, who shared again their expertise and their passion for school safety, and of course all those who behind the scenes were able to help make this happen. Thank you for being a part of this very important conversation, and for all that you do every day to protect and to make sure that our students have the best possible place to learn and grow and thrive. We're glad you're here with us for our Safety Summit, and we look forward to sharing more information about this very important topic with you in the days and months and years ahead.